Welcome to this 10-minute-ish training coming to you a day late, but only because I was actually out supporting a client event yesterday, which was an incredible event and so excited to have spent the time there. But coming back to thinking about what I wanted to teach you or talk to you about this week, I decided to take it back to basics. And it's something that I have posted about before. Some of you in this group would have already seen it. It's also something that I run all of our clients through. It's in all of our masterclasses, and you're quite possibly familiar with it. But I really want to bring us back to basics and bring this back into focus because it really matters with whatever spoken content we're putting together. You know, we build our spoken brand every single time we open our mouths, and we really need to keep this principle front and center to remind us of where we need to be getting, to know that what we're speaking into and about lands. Now, it's really interesting with this because this is the tipping point. We've spoken about it before, and even it's actually used to help you understand where you need to get to, but it's also used, last week I had to use it to remind a client that they were actually further ahead than they thought they were because their inner critic was actually tearing down their performance, and yet their feedback meant that they were actually well and truly on the way to where they needed to be. So sometimes we need to remind ourselves to stretch further, and sometimes it's also to remind ourselves that we're further along than what we thought. So the important thing is that it's all about the evidence that's in front of you. So I'm just going to tip over into our screen right now and just walk you through the tipping point model. And for those of you who have seen this in our posts before, I invite you to actually just surrender 5 to 10 minutes of your time and let's walk through it again, because I don't believe you can ever understand this too deeply. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at where it is that we sit. Now we're going to create a triangle. And the first part of this triangle is when you first discover that there's a thing called professional speaking, when you first discover that you can use speaking to build your business, when you first discover that this is a thing. For some people, it's when they wake up and then realize that there's a message ignited in them that they want to get out to the world. So when you first start, you quite often are down here, which is what I call fighting for attention, desperate for cut through. So you're actually really fired up. You really want to be heard. You really want to get through to places, but you just can't get the cut through. And you sometimes it's just quite simply that you have no idea where to even start. So that's level one. Then we go to level two. And this is where I meet a lot of people, and it's that people are noticing me and my content. And what this means is sometimes your posts get shared, people comment on your quotes, your articles get shared or your blogs get shared, you get good engagement on LinkedIn, you're getting, good engagement on Instagram, TikTok, whatever the platforms are that you're using. Sometimes it's shareable. You're starting to get asked to speak at smaller events, so chambers of commerce, rotaries, business networking events, and it feels like things are starting to move, but it also feels like you don't really know what's going on. So it's kind of like you might walk through a room and people go, "Oh, I saw your article last week. Oh my God, I love your post that you did. I really like hearing you whenever I hear you speak at the little chambers and these business networking events." But it's kind of a bit random. It's definitely not predictable. And you're not even sure if it's being shared by the right people or if you're showing up in the right rooms. So that's at least though people are starting to notice you and your content. Then the next place where I see people all the time, and this is the most dangerous place, and it's going to sound really crazy. So this is the third level, which is you are so good. Now, in this level, we are still in what I call the red zone. You are so good is where so many people get stuck. It's like every time you speak, the best way that I can describe it is every time you speak, the majority of response is, "You're so good. You're so amazing. Your story is incredible. The world needs your work. This is a fabulous idea. This will change the game." And yet the truth is, when you go home every night and close the doors, is that it's not quite commercializing. It's not quite creating demand. It's not quite delivering the things it should. And behind closed doors, you're frustrated, you're confused, and you're actually worried whether or not this thing will actually work. And it seems crazy because everybody is telling you it's so good. The story is so amazing. You are so incredible. Even your work is so necessary. The world needs this. So it feels as though all the feedback is right. And yet the reality is that it's not creating what it is that you want. this is where we go next into the gold zone. And I'm going to give you an example in a moment that really crystallizes the difference between the red zone and the gold zone. And this was, I'd always been teaching it, but there's a moment of truth for me when I was working with a client in 2019 that really demonstrated this for me. And I've been absolutely maniacal about getting this into people's heads ever since, because what we want to do is we want to get to the gold zone, and in the gold zone we're going to be over here, right? So the gold zone is you're in my head, right? So literally it felt as though you were speaking to me. It's like you're in my head. Are you looking in my windows? How do you know what's going on in my world? It's literally they're coming up to you with that sort of response. And what I say to people all the time is they need to be sharing with you. The response you're looking for is when your audience unwittingly shares with you the emotional reaction or the memory that it elicited in them when they heard you speaking about what you're speaking about. When you do that, you are well into the gold zone, and you are well into that magic zone where you drop people from their heads to their hearts, where you get them out of their head as an observer to what you're saying, to immersing themselves in beside you. And when you know you've really nailed it, and it will happen when you master the craft of speaking, when you know you've really nailed it is when they come up and they talk about things that they heard in your story or your speech, and you're in the back of your head. Use your inside voice for this one. In the back of your head, they're actually going, in the back of your head, sorry, you're actually going, I don't remember saying that at all. Right. And that's because your storytelling, your speech has been so masterful that they've been able to put themselves completely inside of it. You've taken them to a completely new space, and they've actually been able to put themselves completely inside of it. Now, the next level up from you're in my head is here's my check. And this is the one that we all like. This is the one I particularly like. I'm a mercenary at heart. We need to get a commercial return. So here's my check is your version of here's my check. So for some people, it's making sure that they're getting paid for a gig. For some people, it's like, come into my world, come and work with my team. We need you in our organization. It's a piece of consulting work. It's a piece of advisory work. It might be products that you have. It might be signups that you want. It might be, because, as I said, it can be whatever it is that you want, but there's an exchange. Now we're starting to work with a lot more creators and accelerators of movements. So charities and not-for-profits, B Corps, social enterprises. Sometimes here's my check is about partnerships and collaboration with key people, right? So here's my check. That's the next level. And then the top level, this is the one that is nirvana. This is the one that as a speaker, you should be reaching for. And this was first taught to me by one of my original mentors more than 10 years ago. And I happen to know he's one of Australia's top professional speakers. He's been speaking for 25 years. And I do know that he still uses this as his benchmark. And that's the trifecta, which is, let me introduce you, is part of it, right? But the trifecta is all about you are rebooked, you are booked by someone in the audience, and you are referred to a booking by someone in the audience. And what that can be another speaking gig, or it can be a piece of work. For somebody, a previous client, one of her things in the trifecta one time she spoke was she got invited to sit on the state government board for the area of her expertise out of one of these presentations. So there's two ways that we go here. Let me introduce you for when we're actually doing the social enterprise, the B Corp, the not-for-profit, the charities, the movements, and also when we're expert business building, because quite often that's taking us into a world we didn't have access to before. So it's opening doors for us. And then it's the trifecta. And the trifecta is the one that we really, really want in our game. So the trifecta is we are rebooked, we are booked by someone in the audience, and we are referred to a booking by someone in the audience. Now, I use the word booking for speaking, but if it's like consulting work you're looking for, coaching work you're looking for, advisory work you're looking for, a new deal or a new agreement or a new channel for your products to market, it's just three of those pieces, whatever matters for you. Okay. So this is how we get to the tipping point and the gold zone. So the tipping point actually sits down here between the red zone and the gold zone, right? And the only way that we can get through the tipping point is actually through story. So numbers, data, research, all matters, right? Depending on your topic, all of it matters. Everything you ever want to talk about, it all matters. But the only way to actually go from the red zone to the gold zone is through story. And everything we do with our clients is to move them from the red zone to the gold zone as fast as we possibly can, right? And it's amazing the difference that it makes. Now, I spoke earlier about a client in 2019 who really brought this home for me. I really understood. And what happened was he was actually quite well known. He was an emerging speaker, but actually pulling off a lot of prizes and scholarships and things like that. Very big personal resilience story. And he reached out to me and asked me if he could work with me. And I was kind of surprised because at that stage, I very definitely specialized in emerging speakers. Now I work with emerging, to use the words of one of my clients, emerging, established, and elite. But one of the things that was really interesting was I was surprised, but he said, I'm not making enough out of my speaking to leave my full time work. And I was really surprised because I did not expect that. So he was very firmly sitting here somewhere. So before taking him on, I said to him, "Are you okay if I come and see you the next time you speak in Brisbane?" So a few weeks after that, he had a closing keynote that he was going to be speaking at in Brisbane. And he came to me and he said, can you come? I said, yes. Okay. So he grabbed a ticket for me. I went in, I saw him speak, and he was firmly in red zone. And what the evidence was actually not specifically about his content, although that needed to be worked on, but it was actually about the fact that he had the "You're so good." So when we were standing at the back of the room at the close of the event, of the 500 people in the room, I believe at least 400 did not leave until they'd spoken to him. Now, that would tell you that you've done really, really well. And it was extraordinary because people were literally hanging around to make sure that they could talk to him before they left. So it took more than an hour to get out of the room after he finished. And he looked at me as the last person walked off and he was like, "See what I mean? Like, I don't understand this." So remember just before I said, people in this area are so confused, right? It's literally, especially when we're in the "you're so good," so confused. And it's literally because everybody's talking about it. Everyone's like, 400 out of 500 people stopped to talk to him before they left. But every single bit of response, bar maybe a few, right, was all about "You're so good. You're so amazing. You're so courageous. Your story is incredible. You're so brave. I don't know if I could do what you did." And he wasn't in "You're my head." So, the difference in language that we hear from people is, as I said earlier, it's like, "I felt like you're talking to me. How do you know my life? It's like you're looking in my windows." It's also things like when you spoke about your grandfather, I wish I'd had one like him. When you spoke about your mother, it reminded me of mine. When you talked about how you worked that through, I realized that I can go and use that. Can I just ask you a question? When you would unpacking that strategy, I just missed a little bit here. Like, I really want to be able to go and share that with the people in my world. Could you just walk me through it? So it's all about the strategies and the ideas, and also that emotional visceral response that you elicit within them, or the connection to memory, their own memory that you elicit within them. And so that's how we know we're in the gold zone. Now, one of my clients that I worked with out of Melbourne had spent probably about 6 or 7 years in the gold zone. And we finally got to work together. And I mean, finally, because I've been friends with her for a long, long time. She's been in my world for a long, long time. And we worked with her very quickly to reshape her content and push her straight into the gold zone. So she went straight in the gold zone. So the first time she delivered with her new content, she went straight to trifecta. She also moved from 3K fees and fighting for them to being offered 10 and 12K fees. So really, really important shift. But the difference that she also talked about, which is something that I hadn't actually articulated clearly, but I want to share it with you, which she said when she was down in the red zone and she kept considering giving up, is because she was so exhausted by the after effect of speaking. And what I mean by that is she would come off a stage and people loved her story because it's an amazing lived experience story. But they would ask her more detail. It was kind of like they were clawing at her for more of her personal detail. They wanted to expose more. And she just found that so exhausting. And to be honest, I don't think there's anyone watching this training that wouldn't find that so exhausting. She said once she moved into the cold zone, she was no longer exhausted by speaking because when people came up, they were sharing what it elicited for them. They were sharing what it reminded them of. They were sharing the hope that they gave them. They were sharing the people that they're going to share her story with. They were sharing the things they were going to take away and use in their world and share with others. And none of it clawed further at her. Right. And so what she realized, the other thing, the unexpected, unintended benefit of heading up into the gold zone and into the trifecta was that she was not being drained and exhausted by the audience response. Now, when you actually are going to be doing this a lot as professional speaking career, as an expert business builder, or as the creator of a movement that you want to accelerate, then you are going to speak more and more and more. So whatever we can do to reduce that, I guess, adrenal load and that exhaustion that you can get, whatever we can do to do that is really powerful in its own right. Because if you're good at this, you're going to be in demand, right? And let me change that. when you're good at this, you're going to be in demand. So it's a really, really important thing for us to think about. So as I wrap out that 10-minute training, what I want you to think about is, where do you sit on that triangle, right? From the bottom of the zone to the top of the zone. And if you have experienced what it's like to be in the gold zone, is it consistent, right? Is it consistent? Can you depend on it? Is it the majority of the time? Because let's be honest, and I know I can use this word here, we're all going to have fuck ups and screw ups when we speak. Nothing ever goes completely to plan. But is the majority of your experience in the gold zone, or are there flashes of brilliance that take you in the gold zone that you then drop into the red zone? Because wherever you are, the good news is that you can get higher and you can reach further from the red zone to the gold zone. But what I want you to remember is always, the difference maker between going from the red zone to the gold zone is not only being intentional, it's actually mastering the craft of storytelling that will actually engage your audience and get them to drop from head to heart, so that they come and tell you about what it elicits for them and not how good you were.